In a world where papal visits are meticulously planned and broadcast worldwide, imagine this: Pope Leo XIV slipping away quietly, without cameras, without fanfare, into the abandoned gardens of Castel Gandolfo. Why would the spiritual leader of millions choose to visit a place shrouded in silence and forgotten history? What secret did he seek in these sacred halls, once a summer retreat, now a symbol of silence? Today, we reveal 10 unforgettable moments from this deeply personal visit, moments that unveil the unexpected humanity of Pope Leo XIV. From tender reflections to surprising acts of humility, these glimpses behind the scenes will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Pope. So, what moved him to make this surprise pilgrimage? What did he discover behind those ancient walls? Let's begin with number 1. Number 1, the silent arrival, a journey without announcement. Imagine a moment when the leader of the Catholic Church steps away from the spotlight, no flashing cameras, no welcoming crowds, just a simple, silent arrival. Pope Leo XIV's unannounced visit to Castel Gandolfo was exactly that kind of moment, intimate, unpretentious, and deeply human. What compelled the Pope to leave the Vatican's grandeur behind and walk quietly into these historic hills, forsaking the pomp and ceremony usually surrounding him? What was he searching for in this place steeped in centuries of papal tradition but now left mostly untouched? Pope Leo XIV's surprise pilgrimage south of Rome stunned observers precisely because it broke from all expectations. Castel Gandolfo, once the cherished summer residence of popes, has largely been dormant since Pope Francis transformed it into a public museum, emphasizing simplicity and environmental stewardship. Yet, this historic retreat remains a sacred space, echoing with prayers and memories of past pontiffs. In this quiet journey, the Pope demonstrated a rare vulnerability, choosing authenticity over spectacle. His decision to arrive without fanfare spoke volumes. This was not a public relations event, but a deeply personal pilgrimage. As he crossed the ancient threshold, the weight of history seemed to settle on his shoulders. Here, amidst olive trees and terraced gardens, he connected not just with tradition, but with a renewed mission, a call to care for creation, reflected in the Borgo Laudato Si's commitment to ecological harmony. Catholic tradition teaches that true leadership often requires humility and silence, values Pope Leo XIV embodied fully that day. In stepping away from the ceremonial roles, he revealed a man who listens, reflects, and seeks spiritual renewal in solitude. His silent arrival invites us all to consider what it means to lead quietly in a noisy world. But this was just the beginning. Behind the stillness lay moments of profound insight and unexpected warmth that will reshape how we see the Pope's mission. What did he find in those silent gardens? Let's discover the first unforgettable glimpse of his human side. Number 2, a pilgrimage to the Garden of the Virgin Mary. In a world filled with constant motion and noise, Pope Leo XIV chose to step into a quiet sanctuary, a sacred garden dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Before any official greetings or formal ceremonies, he paused here, alone with his thoughts, offering a moment of profound devotion. What thoughts filled his heart during this silent pilgrimage? Was it just tradition, or something deeper, a spiritual dialogue between the leader of millions and the mother of Christ? The Garden of the Virgin Mary at Castel Gandolfo is no ordinary place. Rooted in centuries of Catholic faith, it represents a living symbol of purity, compassion, and unwavering hope. For Pope Leo XIV, this visit was far more than a simple stop or a ceremonial photo opportunity. It was a deeply personal act of reverence. As he stood quietly among the blossoming roses and gentle olive trees, the Pope entered into a sacred space where nature and faith intertwine. The garden has long served as a quiet refuge for popes seeking spiritual renewal, echoing the prayers of countless pilgrims who have found solace beneath its branches. Catholic tradition holds Mary as a powerful intercessor and a model of contemplative faith. Pope Leo's silent prayer here revealed a vulnerability rarely seen in public, a moment of reflection on his own mission, the Church's challenges, and a prayer for peace in a world that often seems divided and troubled. This pause in the garden, away from the eyes of the world, highlighted his deep Marian devotion and the spiritual nourishment he draws from this connection. The Pope's gesture reminds believers everywhere that leadership, above all, is a call to humility and prayerful service. But what exactly did this moment inspire in the Pope? What renewed resolve did he carry away from the garden of the Virgin Mary? The answers lie in the days that followed, where his words and actions would reveal a vision shaped by this silent encounter. Number 3. Following the footsteps of Pope Pius XII. Beneath the sunlit elegance of Castel Gandolfo lies a shadowed corridor, a place where history, courage, and quiet heroism once converged. In this very space, Pope Leo XIV walked not just through stone archways, but through a living memory of moral conviction. Why did Pope Leo pause so solemnly in the cryptoporticus? What silent legacy echoed in that dim passageway, nearly lost to time? It was in the cryptoporticus, a long, hidden corridor in the foundations of the papal villa, that Pope Pius XII offered quiet refuge to thousands during one of history's darkest hours. In 1944, as war engulfed Europe and bombs fell near Rome, Pope Pius opened Castel Gandolfo's doors to over 12,000 displaced civilians, among them Jews, pregnant women, and children. The papal estate, usually a retreat for peace, became a place of sanctuary and salvation. Decades later, Pope Leo XIV entered this same space, not with words, but with stillness. His pause was more than a tribute, it was a communion with courage. In that silence, he honored a moment when the Church stood as a shield for the innocent. The cryptoporticus, lined with ancient stones, had once sheltered lives, now, it bore witness to remembrance. As Leo stood where Pius once acted, the past and present touched. It was a living bridge between the urgent mercy of then and the compassionate vision of now. In a world once again fraught with displacement, migration, and war, Leo's contemplation signaled something more, a reminder that the Church's mission to protect the vulnerable remains unbroken. This gesture wasn't made for headlines. It was for history, for the memory of lives saved, and for a future shaped by the same resolve. But what will Pope Leo XIV do with this legacy? How will this sacred encounter with history inform the choices he makes in today's complex world? The days ahead may provide an answer. Number 4. The Belvedere Gardens, a shepherd in creation's classroom. In an age of digital distractions and ecological disrepair, Pope Leo XIV chose a very different pulpit, a garden. What truth was he hoping to unearth beneath Castel Gandolfo's blooming pathways? And why does he believe that flowers, trees, and silence can proclaim the gospel more powerfully than words? When Pope Leo stepped into the Belvedere Gardens, he wasn't merely admiring God's artistry, he was entering a classroom. Every fern, every olive tree, every buzzing bee around him seemed to echo a line from Laudato Si, the entire material universe speaks of God's love. This was more than a stroll, it was a prayer in motion, a meditation in the open air. Castel Gandolfo's gardens, meticulously cared for across generations, carry within them centuries of papal reflection. But under Leo's gaze, they took on fresh urgency. He saw in their order and beauty not just a heritage of faith, but a mission field. These trees had weathered seasons and storms, so too must humanity weather the climate crisis. And where better to be reminded of that sacred task than in the soil itself? To Leo, creation is catechesis. The shifting shade of cypress trees and the soft hum of nature are not just beautiful, they are instructive. They teach humility, interdependence, and sacred responsibility. In this sense, Pope Leo follows in the footsteps of Pope Francis, but walks further still, choosing not just to reflect on ecology, but to inhabit it. And as he paused beside a trickling fountain framed by wildflowers, he seemed to issue a silent invitation, will we join him in listening to what creation is saying? But is this only symbolic? Or is Leo planting seeds for something much larger, a spiritual and environmental renewal rooted in action, not just admiration? The next steps may reveal how far this garden truly reaches. Number 5. Meeting the marginalized, without cameras rolling. There were no microphones. No flashing cameras. Just a pope, some folding chairs, and the kinds of people headlines often forget. Why did Pope Leo XIV insist that this part of his visit be private, shielded even from the Vatican's own press corps? Long after the official greetings were done and the garden tours concluded, Pope Leo quietly stepped into the heart of Borgo Laudato Si's mission. Away from podiums and ceremony, he entered a modest room where life's bruised and beautiful survivors were waiting, migrants searching for safety, former prisoners rebuilding dignity, and disabled individuals often overlooked by society. The Pope listened, not out of obligation, but kinship. Before becoming Pope, Leo had lived among the poor in Peru, working shoulder to shoulder with those most forgotten. That experience shaped him. It taught him that the Church's strength lies not in vaulted ceilings but in outstretched hands. One man, an ex-inmate who now tends gardens at the Borgo, wept as the Pope embraced him. A young woman with cerebral palsy offered him a drawing. He kissed it gently before tucking it into his cassock. These weren't gestures for cameras. They were sacraments of presence. This moment echoed Matthew 25, "When I was in prison, you visited me." Leo wasn't just quoting it, he was living it. These people, society's castaways, weren't props in a speech, they were the message. The Church, in his eyes, must go where the world recoils. It must touch wounds without gloves. This wasn't performative charity. It was quiet solidarity, the kind that reverberates louder than applause. But what else did Leo leave behind in that unfilmed room? As rumors swirl about his next encyclical, could these hushed encounters be shaping the Church's boldest mission yet? Number 6. Ancestral Land, Modern Mission, Walking Where Emperors Ruled. Stone walls remember everything. And on this day, those silent stones bore witness to something they'd never seen before, or a pope walking the ancient halls once trod by emperors. What happens when the successor of Peter walks where Caesar once ruled? Can holiness inhabit the footprints of empire? Pope Leo XIV entered the cryptoporticus at Castel Gandolfo with quiet reverence. The corridor, arched, echoing, once patrolled by Emperor Domitian's guards, now held a different kind of power. Not the force of empire, but the humility of faith. Beneath the vaulted stone, Leo paused. His hand grazed the walls that once belonged to tyrants. Domitian had declared himself Lord and God. Now, centuries later, Christ's vicar walked the same ground, not in conquest, but in service. It wasn't lost on Leo. His steps were slow, deliberate, contemplative. As a former missionary, he knew how space and story intertwine. He wasn't just walking through history, he was praying in it. For him, the cryptoporticus wasn't just a Roman relic. It was a crucible of contrast, power versus mercy, empire versus the kingdom of God. Later, a Vatican aide shared that Leo had whispered Psalm 84 as he walked, "My soul yearns, even faints for the courts of the Lord." These weren't just words. They were a quiet act of redemption, transforming imperial ruins into holy ground. Leo didn't give a speech here. He didn't need to. His presence said everything, that the Church does not erase history, it baptizes it. That the halls of Rome, once echoing with Caesar's decrees, can now carry the silence of prayer. As Leo continues shaping a Church attuned to both past and future, one can't help but wonder, how will these ancient paths guide his next bold steps? Number 7, From Palace to People's Museum, Upholding Francis's Legacy. The marble still gleams. The frescoes still shine. But this palace is no longer private. Why would a pope enter a former papal retreat, not to reclaim it, but to affirm its openness? When Pope Leo XIV walked through the gates of Castel Gandolfo, many expected tradition to reassert itself. After all, this villa was once the sanctuary of popes, resting, ruling, reflecting behind guarded walls. But Leo came not to reside, but to revere. Not to restore old exclusivities, but to honor a radical shift, Pope Francis's bold decision to open the palace as a public museum. That choice in 2016 stunned many. Pope Francis, in keeping with his vision of a humble papacy, chose not to spend summers there. Instead, he unlocked its doors, offering the faithful, tourists, and scholars alike a rare view into papal life once kept behind velvet ropes. Now, nearly a decade later, Pope Leo's quiet visit was more than symbolic. He toured the villa as any other guest might, with a modest entourage and no press conference. He stood where others now stand, not as owner, but as observer. It was his way of saying, "This does not belong to me, it belongs to you." Observers noted his long pause in the papal bedroom, now preserved as it was last used. Leo offered no comment. But one aide later remarked that he simply whispered, this is not a throne room. This is a guest room. For a church wrestling with questions of transparency, authority, and humility, the moment spoke volumes. Leo wasn't reversing Francis's path, he was reinforcing it. In a place once meant to shield the Pope from the world, he instead pointed outward, toward the people. Could this be the beginning of more sacred spaces becoming shared spaces? If Leo continues this path, the next doors to open may be even older and holier. Number 8. Sustainability with soul, touring the Borgo Laudato Si. It wasn't a grand basilica or marble-floored hall. It was compost piles, solar panels, and the scent of tomato vines that greeted the Pope. Why would the successor of St. Peter spend his morning among irrigation lines and soil-stained boots? When Pope Leo XIV stepped into the Borgo Laudato Si, he wasn't merely paying a courtesy visit, he was walking into a living gospel. Created as a Vatican-backed sustainability village, the Borgo is a bold extension of Pope Francis's 2015 encyclical Laudato Si, calling for ecological conversion and care for our common home. But this wasn't theory. It was theology, applied. Pope Leo didn't just shake hands, he asked questions. He bent down to smell herbs in the garden beds. He smiled as a group of formerly unemployed youth explained how they were learning soil regeneration and hydroponics as part of a job training initiative. In one corner of the village, a compost bin, once mundane, became sacred when the Pope listened to an educator explain its role in creating life from waste. There were no cardinals in red robes flanking him, no Vatican guards at attention. Just the hum of bees, the buzz of workers, and a Pope who seemed more teacher than ruler. This is holy ground, he reportedly said. Because this is where human dignity is planted. The visit marked more than environmental awareness, it signaled a bridge between Catholic social teaching and ecological activism. It underscored a belief that faith cannot float above the earth, it must be rooted in it. And the message was clear, caring for creation is not extra credit Catholicism. It's core doctrine. In every workshop, in every conversation, Leo reaffirmed what Francis had insisted years earlier, that the environment is not a side issue, it's a moral one. If Leo's first visit to the Borgo felt pastoral, will his next step be prophetic? The soil may be telling us more than we realize. Number 9. Remembering the vineyard of mercy and labor. The vines are still young. Their roots shallow. But what they represent may one day nourish more than wine, it may nourish a world in search of mercy. Could this modest patch of earth become a sacred altar, not of incense and relics, but of work, restoration, and ecological hope? At Castel Gandolfo, just beyond the shaded courtyards once frequented by popes of centuries past, a quiet transformation is taking root. Literally. In freshly tilled soil, a vineyard has been planted, not just to harvest grapes, but to cultivate a powerful metaphor, dignity through labor, mercy through ecology. During his historic visit, Pope Leo XIV didn't press his hands into the vines, but he did bless them in spirit. His voice carried over the rows as he spoke of those whose hands would one day prune the branches and crush the fruit, migrants, the jobless, the forgotten. The land remembers who works it, he said softly, and God does too. This vineyard isn't about profit. It's about prophecy. Inspired by Laudato Si and long-standing Catholic teachings on work and creation, the project echoes ancient biblical symbolism. From Noah's post-flood vineyard to Christ's parables of the laborious, wine and vine have always spoken of divine generosity and human responsibility. Now, this newly planted vineyard adds a chapter to that tradition. Designed to serve as both ecological experiment and social outreach, it will eventually provide organic wine for local liturgies, while offering agricultural training to those on society's margins. What's striking is how seamlessly it integrates the sacred and the practical. This is Catholic social teaching, not in encyclicals, but in earthworms and rootstock. The vineyard is both altar and classroom, sacrament and survival. As Pope Leo looked across the fields, the simplicity of the scene revealed its grandeur. No fanfare. Just the quiet planting of hope, row by row. And as these vines grow, so too might a new theology of land, where mercy, work, and worship are no longer separate fields. Number 10. Leaving without a window appearance, a statement of simplicity. No curtain was drawn. No arms lifted in blessing from a high balcony. Only silence, and the sound of footsteps leaving. Why would the Pope, present in a place so rich in papal tradition, choose to leave without even a wave to the crowd? In the heart of Castel Gandolfo, where generations of pilgrims once stood below the palace balcony hoping to catch a glimpse of the Holy Father, a woman clutched her rosary and waited. Her voice, tired but hopeful, rose above the hushed crowd. Just one look, Holy Father. But Pope Leo XIV never stepped into view. There was no appearance. No blessing from the window. Only stillness. It wasn't a snub. It wasn't detachment. It was intentional. Pope Leo's decision to forego the traditional balcony gesture sent a quiet shockwave through those gathered, especially the media crews, poised for a photogenic moment. But that moment never came. What came instead was a deeper kind of presence, one rooted in humility, not spectacle. By leaving without a visual farewell, Leo echoed a growing conviction in his papacy that leadership should not depend on optics. In an age saturated with screens and curated moments, he reminded the Church that holiness often moves invisibly. His was a departure not from the villa, but from the expectation that papal authority must always be seen to be felt. This moment stands in stark contrast to historical precedent. Pope John Paul II often appeared joyfully from these same balconies. Pope Benedict XVI blessed thousands here. But Pope Leo XIV redefined the space, not by standing in it, but by leaving it empty. That choice evoked Christ's own moments of quiet departure, slipping away from the crowds after healing, praying alone in the garden, or rising from the tomb before dawn, unseen. In Leo's quiet exit, something loud was said. And so we're left not with an image, but with an echo. What if the Church's most powerful statement today is not what it shows, but what it silently refuses to perform? From ancient stones to new vineyards. From Marian gardens filled with memory to training centers brimming with hope. Pope Leo XIV's visit to Castel Gandolfo wasn't just a return to a historic villa, it was a reimagining of it. He didn't come for rest. He came for renewal. The biggest takeaway? That the papacy, in Leo's hands, is being recast not as a ceremonial office, but as a living witness. One that listens, walks with the outcast, plants where others have abandoned, and prays in places long silenced. And the most unexpected moment? It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't a photo op. It was the absence of both. When the crowd waited beneath the balcony, cameras ready, hearts open, Pope Leo never appeared. No wave. No blessing. Just a quiet departure. That silence? It was his loudest sermon. In that stillness, he reminded us, true authority doesn't demand to be seen. It just walks away, humbly, purposefully, faithfully. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What did Pope Leo XIV's quiet departure from the balcony mean to you? How do you interpret leadership that chooses humility over visibility? Which part of the Castel Gandolfo transformation moved you the most, and why? Do you believe silence can sometimes speak louder than words? Share a time it did for you. If you could ask Pope Leo one question about his visit, what would it be? We'd be honored to read your reflections in the comments below. And if this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more from Sacred Pulse Times.